Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, as per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, commented, liked, did the social media stuff, all that kind of stuff. Your support is always appreciated, and hopefully I will carry on entertaining you in the usual manner. So today's episode of the show, there is a style of spirit, shall we say, that after 330 odd episodes of the show I still haven't actually got round to reviewing, and I must admit it's one that I've not bust a gut to actually do, but I thought it's probably about time I actually did it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about so-called dark rums, or navy rums, or as I like to call them, abominations. Now obviously, now all the samples for today's episode of the show I tasted for the 2015 World Rum Awards, and as you well know, I was digging in boxes not so long ago, and lo and behold found all these, and I thought it's probably about time I actually sort of, I wouldn't say scientifically looked at these things, but maybe just put aside the prejudice for 5 minutes, or well, actually sort of probably more like 35 minutes, I guess, and actually taste them and sort of like, you know, are they much maligned? Are they, you know, just caramel coloured abominations? I mean, you know, let's look at this in a sort of, you know, a less judgmental light, shall we say. Anyway, so dark rums, it's a bit of an anomalous kind of, well, I say concept. I mean, you know, with regards to the samples for the World Rum Awards, I mean, they were split into obviously white, gold, and dark. You know, and it's obviously somebody's judgment call. I mean, you know, there was a couple of samples that I had that were in the dark category that didn't actually look particularly dark. They looked golden to me. So obviously, apart from the woods, which I got the sample from the rep. So let's just look at the colour to start off with. As we know, all distilled spirits come off the still colourless. Obviously, any colour has to come from either what it's been aged in, or has to be artificially coloured with E150. So this is a sample of, as you can see, this is Angostura. This is 7 years old, and it's, as far as I'm aware, uncoloured, aged in American oak, and it has the kind of colour that you would expect a spirit to have after spending 7 years in the cask. Now, looking at all of these, if you take away, say, for example, the first one, the Beenleigh, which is 5 years old, okay, that possibly could be completely natural coloured. Then you look at this one, the Ron Prohibido. Well, look at the difference in colour in that. I mean, obviously this is a blend of different aged rums, but again, it's not an expensive bottling. And then you look at, say, this one. This is the Pussers. This is 3 years old. Look at the colour of that. Apparently, according to the Pussers website, they use no artificial colouring. Okay, that's 7 years old. That's 3, and that is darker. Now, okay, so well, they could have used sherry casks, possibly. Certainly, the Ron Prohibido, as far as I'm concerned, from the information I could find, seems to imply they age in ex-raisin wine casks, which I can only assume must mean made from raisinated grapes, therefore must be sherry. And of course, you know, it doesn't need to spend a huge amount of time in active sherry casks for it to pick up colour. For example, exhibit number 2, this is the new 8-year-old Kilkerran, aged in recharred sherry casks. I mean, so that's 8 years, and look at the colour of that. That is really dark, about the same sort of colour as the Ron Prohibido. So it's possible that it's picked up all its colour from being aged in ex-sherry casks. Possibly. I don't know. Now, so look, and then you look at this one. Look at the woods, for God's sake. I mean, that is just black. It's absorbing the light, for God's sake. You know, it's like. Let's put it this way. In my experience of all the sort of Navy rums I've tasted, they really are quite rough. And let's put it this way, you know, a lot of them, like Pussers, claim to have a heritage dating back to the 1600s and all that kind of stuff. And let's be honest now, you know, Navy rum, stuff served to sailors in the 1700s was not going to be top quality, was it? You know, which is why it's so dark, because it's basically cheap rum, which has been heavily coloured with caramel to make it look older. And this is that. No one's going to argue that is the history of Navy rums, of dark rums. You know, they physically cannot get that colour. Unless you've used active sherry cask, and let's put it this way, most of these inexpensive rums are not going to be aged in sherry cask because they're expensive. So the colour has to be from caramel, can't be anything other than that. And of course, that when you're using so much caramel to darken a spirit to the extent that these are darkened, you're going to get telltale signs, I would have thought. And so this is what we're going to be looking at, you know, today. You know, are these an abomination? Are these just horrendous young spirits that have been swamped with caramel? Or do they have relevance? Do they have a place? Are they actually quite pleasant? Are they caramel coloured? There's so many questions, you know, and hopefully by the end of this episode we will have a few answers. So let's have a look at today's lineup. Right, so we're going to kick off, like I said, the first one is a Australian rum called Beenleigh, and this is their 5-year-old. Now apparently Beenleigh Distillery is allegedly the oldest recorded Australian rum distillery and was founded in 1884. It's molasses based rum which comes from the Rocky Point sugar mill in Queensland, then double distilled, pot still distilled, I believe, and aged, possibly coloured, but then again, like I said, it does very much resemble the 7-year-old. In actual fact, I think I've got down here, yep, I've got the Angostura. That's the Angostura 5-year-old, and it's a little darker than that, but not by a huge amount. So it's a possibility that could actually be natural coloration. Second bottle we'll be looking at is a Mexican rum, allegedly. Well, the brand is Mexican. Ron Prohibido, I believe, is the pronunciation. And like I said, allegedly aged in raisin wine casks, so it's got to be sherry. And well, it's possible, looking at the colour. I don't know what the age of it is, but I can't imagine it's going to be particularly old from the fact that it retails from between 20 and 25 quid. Then we've got the 3 Pussers. So the first one we're looking at is the classic blue label, bottled at 40%. Like I said, according to the website, they claim no colouring and no artificial sweetening or colouring. Are they telling fibs? I don't honestly know, but we shall hopefully find out. The next bottle we'll be looking at, again bottled at 40%, is the Pusser's 15-year-old. Now, looking at the colour of that, it is a possibility that it's got that colour from spending 15 years in oak, but it looks remarkably close in colour to the 3-year-old and to the next bottling, which is what they've now called the Gunpowder proof bottling, which was at 54.5%. Doesn't carry an age statement, so one has to naturally assume it's probably closer in age to 3 as it is to 15. But would you be able to tell from the colour? Don't think so. And then finally, we're looking at this black one. I mean, this is Wood's. Now, Wood's Old Navy Rum is bottled at 57%, and I believe the brand was created in 1887. It's all from the Diamond Distillery in Guyana, so one has to assume that the quality has got to be pretty good. You know, Diamond Distillery, as far as I'm aware, don't produce crap rum. It's supposedly a blend of 3 different rums produced at the distillery, so I'm going to hazard a guess at probably predominantly their pot still, maybe some of the Enmore, the wooden Enmore still, or possibly there might be some column still spirit in there. But the thing is, I mean, if this blend has been in existence since 1887, it would possibly have originally been blended from the various distilleries in Guyana, so it may well have been a combination of Diamond, Port Moran, or Versailles, or something like that. So we shall see. Anyway, just coming back to the Pussers, the Pusser's rums are, although I think the company is registered in the British Virgin Islands, I think the rums that they use for their blend are from Trinidad and Guyana. So, Diamond Distillery, and obviously. Anyway, so yeah, that's this week's lineup. I think this is going to be quite a challenge. So let's kick off with a bit of Australian rum then, shall we? Right, okay, so this is the Beenleigh 5-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Sweet, treacly, slightly balsamic, quite coffeed. Touch of burnt coffee stroke caramel. Granulated sugar sort of note. I'm not getting any real telltale caramel bitterness, so I'm going to go with the fact that I don't think this is coloured. I think I'm going to stick my neck out and say this is all wood character, and there's a lot of wood character. Like I said, there's a lot of it's basically sort of molasses and an oak, really. It's a bit simple. I mean, it's pleasant enough. There's some dried fruit there. It is really quite sweet. I wonder whether there is a little bit of post distillation sweetening going on here. Not that I'm particularly fussed about that. That's one of the few things I'm not really that worried about. Let's see what the palate like. That is really sweet, and I mean really sweet, almost to the point of cloyingly sweet. Creamy toffee, loads and loads of sort of creamy toffee, sort of slightly sort of caramelly toffee oakiness, a little bit of dried fruit, a little bit of citrus, but my God, that is sweet. That has to be sweetened post distillation, and too sweetened in my personal opinion. The balance isn't really there. It's a little flat on the finish, and it could have done with a little bit more of a citric kind of note, or a little bit more spice or something like that. Less oak and less sweetening, I think, would have been good here. Because, like I said, I think the balance is completely off key. Like I said, far too much sugar there, and well, at least it's not been caramelised, I suppose. So. Okay, so let's move on to the Ron Prohibido. Let's see what nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh, good God. and burnt caramel. I mean, yeah, it's got a grapiness. There's a sort of raisiny, winey, vanilla ice cream sort of note. I mean, that is, again, that is really sweet, and I wouldn't be surprised if this had been not only coloured with caramel, it's, I would guess, sweetened as well. It is hugely sweet, and again, it doesn't quite have enough of a citric note or a spice note or something like that, just to kind of offset the sweetness. It's a little balsamic as well, it has to be said. But even that is not kind of vinegary enough to sort of give some kind of offset to the sweetness. See what the palate's like. It's a bit bitter, it's a bit cloying. Ooh, I don't like that finish at all. It's sweet, it's very sweet, it's raisinated, it's sticky. I just feel like my mouth is clogged up with sugar. I don't like that at all. I mean, that's awful, really awful, it has to be said. It has no balance, it's sweet, it's bitter. Oh dear God, why you would want to choose to drink that, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever, but I gave that a 6 out of 10, and I think that was probably being quite generous. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the three Pussers. This is the 3-year-old, the blue label, the standard bottling. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Can't say I'm getting a huge amount, to be honest with you. There's a little bit of oiliness, there's a bit of coffee, a bit of almost plasticky kind of notes. A little herbal. It really isn't a huge amount of character at all, and given this is 3 years old, I can't say I'm really that surprised, to be honest with you. There's no real, it's not overly sweet, so I'm guessing that it's not sweetened. I'm not really picking up any telltale bitterness, caramel bitterness, but it is very flat. Which again would sort of lead me to believe that caramel is at play here, because that's one of the things that sort of caramel does. It just literally flattens everything, and this has no real highs and lows. It's no light and shade. It's a bit, you know. See what the palate's like. Raisinated fruit, little bit of Guyana-esque oiliness, a little bit of, I'm getting some bitterness now on the finish, and given this is 3 years old and really has very little complexity whatsoever, bar a bit of raisinated fruit, I'm going to have to say that this is pretty much coloured. The dampening, the flattening of the nose, slight bitterness on the palate, it all just kind of leads me to believe that basically they're telling porkies when they say this is not artificially coloured. I believe it's not artificially sweetened, but certainly my palate seems to tell me that it has been caramelised, and it's pretty, frankly, it's pretty boring. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? quite herbal. Getting camphor, eucalyptus, coffee, quite a lot of coffee in actual fact, a bit of molasses, walnuts. I mean, it's relatively straightforward, but it's got some pleasant depth. It feels more natural. There may not actually be any caramel used in the 15-year-old, and frankly you would wonder why. You would have thought that probably is closer to the colour that you would expect something to develop, you know, given that length of time in cask. There's a little bit of nuttiness, a bit of walnut. Yeah, okay, I can live with this one. This is not too bad. Let's see what the palate gives us, shall we? Again, slightly aged Rancio, prunes, walnuts, a little bit of sticky toffee. Again, doesn't feel like it's been caramelised, and certainly the palate isn't flattened. It's got some life. It's a bit short. It's not too sweet. Again, don't think it's been artificially sweetened. The alcohol seems to have enough input to kind of balance the sweetness. It's a little cloying at the end, I guess. It's not particularly complex. I must admit I didn't look up what it's retailing for. It's a bit raisiny. I mean, it's okay. It's so far it's the best one that I've tasted. Like I said, it's a bit simple, but at least it has slightly more of a natural feel to it than any of the others, apart from maybe the Beenleigh possibly. So yeah, okay, I can live with that. Okay, so let's move on to the gunpowder proof. So this is 54 point. Ooh, struth. Pusser's revenge. Let's see what the nose gives us. That's really herbal, intensely herbal. Bitter coffee. Again, it's not what you would call over-endowed with complexity. It's pungent, it's in your face, it's quite sweet, although the alcohol is reining that sweetness in. It's sort of, I guess it's the higher ABV is obviously sort of, I wouldn't say masking any possible caramel usage here, but it's obviously offsetting the deadening effect of the caramel, and so yes, you are getting some intensity, but is that sort of real intensity, spirit intensity, or is that alcohol intensity? That, of course, is the question. See what the palate's like. Burnt, bitter. Oh God, that's bitter. Quite intense. Syrupy, sort of molassy sweetness. I mean, that is just, ooh, God, that's all over the place. It's slightly cloying, it's burnt, it's bitter, it's burnt coffee, it's yeah, that's the only thing I can say that it's got going for it. It has intensity, but that's down to the alcohol rather than anything else. Should we put some? Yeah, let's put some water with it. I really haven't got a huge amount left there, but we'll see what a little drop of water has done to it. And do you know, it actually smells more like an agricole now. It's really, I'm getting a lot of young Guyanan stroke agricole, pungent, herbal, and that's about it really. I mean, it is really raw. I mean, it's kind of putting that little drop of water with it. It's kind of stripped off everything else, and just you get the raw spirit remaining, kind of thing. See what pass like that. Nothing there really. It's slightly raw, slightly sort of oily, slightly dried fruit. It's just kind of anything and everything has just disappeared by sticking some water with it, and that's really disappointing. Right, okay, so finally let's move on to the woods. I mean, okay, let's just see what the nose gives us. Lots of dried fruit, sweet, sticky dried fruit, licorice, violets. God, it's really syrupy. Such a spice, possibly. Bittering, so obvious caramel influencing notes there, although I'm quite surprised that it has the vivacity, but again, it's 57%, and that extra, alcohol is certainly, I guess, overriding the deadening effect of the caramel. It's a little bit of a almost butric-y kind of note, not quite, it's a sort of somewhere between butric and astringent. It's an odd note in the background. You know what? It's not horrible. It might sound a bit, but you know what? It's got a bit of character, I suppose. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Quite edgy. I'm certainly getting that woody spiciness, which would lead me to believe that there's some of the either the Enmore or wooden still spirit here. A little bit of pepper, sort of almost green pepper, licorice, again, telltale bitter caramel notes, roasted coffee. It's got character, I will give it that. I mean, it certainly has character, it has intensity, but then again, like I said, it is 57%. You would expect it to have some kind of intensity. It would be pretty piss poor if it didn't actually have any intensity with that level of alcohol. The sweetness I can feel at the edges is being sort of, you know, again contained by the alcohol. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see whether it becomes even more sweeter. God, bloody hell. Sort of, I could see things happening there as I was putting the water with it, which would kind of, again, seem to sort of hint at coloration. I mean, you know, you're not going to tell me that that has not been coloured. I mean, you know, I had a brief look on their website and they didn't tend to make any claims that it wasn't coloured, should we say. They didn't say it was coloured, but at least they weren't telling porkies. It's got a little soapiness now, it's a bit sweeter, which is what I was expecting, but it's possible that it may have had a little bit of post-distillation sweetness, because again, it has a lot of sweetness, and I don't think the spirit is that old in here. It's a blend of different aged spirits, so there may well be a bit of older spirit in here, but I mean, again, I would have thought that it's going to be majority of about 5 to 8 years old, I would have thought. it's quite coffeed. It's yeah, it's okay. But there is that sort of slight sapiness that really sort of is kind of, you know. Anyway, let's see what it passes like now. Bit sweeter. It's still got some of that oily Guyana and carrot coming through. A little bit more of the bitterness now on the finish, and it certainly sort of, again, points the finger at the caramel. A little kind of cola-y kind of note. I mean, again, it's okay. I wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's a complete abomination, but it is not sort of something I'm going to rave about. But I think that's probably the most interesting and the most characterful of all of these rums. So yeah, not a bad one to end on, I suppose. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Interesting. I think it was interesting, and I still think that this whole navy stroke dark rum is a bit of a bloody abomination, it has to be said. I thought the Beenleigh was okay. It was just a bit too sweet. I don't think it was, well, no, alright, it was a bit oaky sweet. Too much vanilla, too much caramel, but I don't think it had been sweetened, and I certainly don't think it had been coloured. So from that kind of point, yeah, I think I could live with that. Just not particularly complex. The Ron Prohibido, oh dear God, I mean, that was just awful. It really was. I mean, yeah, all right, okay. So got the wininess. Obviously, it's been aged in ex-sherry casks, although I still think it's been sweetened and probably carameled as well, I would have thought, because it is just, yeah. The Pussers, the 3-year-old, well, I mean, it was 3-year-old, it was caramel flattened, it was frankly dull. I can't understand why anyone would be particularly interested in drinking that whatsoever. The 15-year-old, now that I thought was a better rum, not because it was older, but because it was more natural. There didn't seem to be so much of the caramelisation, and it just felt more natural, which is what you want from any spirit. Doesn't matter whether it's rum, whiskey, gin, etc., etc. You just want a natural feel to the spirit, and I thought of the three, I mean, that was just, bitter. I mean, it was intense because it was a bottle of cask strength or navy strength, as the case may be, but it had very little redeeming features other than the fact it was intensely alcoholic. And the woods, I think sort of overall the most interesting of all of these dark rums. Certainly not something I would kind of rave about, and but the point being is, we get customers that come in the shop that say, do you do dark rum, do you do navy rum? And at this present moment in time, I don't, because of what I feel about this particular category of spirits. And if you're looking at it from a purely sort of hard-nosed business kind of mind, customers comes in the shop, looks for a product, can't find it, will go and buy it from somebody else. So therefore, by default, I should have that product for them to buy. Now, I wouldn't go do this for everything, because you just can't do that, and I'm not compromising my beliefs and my belief in quality for the sake of making a few bucks, but I'm obviously missing out on something, and maybe I should have the woods on the shelf. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I can probably guarantee you that we will not be revisiting dark or navy rums again, or at least not no time soon. So yeah, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's always good to sort of have a good get something off your chest, kind of. Soapboxy sort of rant away, I suppose. But yeah, anyway, so that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. All that's left to say is good ramming and good afternoon.